Hi friends, welcome to MB Python series. In this video, we're going to talk about how to use the FTP Python module for FTP server communication and perform tasks like downloading files, uploading files, deleting files in a FTP server. So the things which we are going to cover in this session is how to use FTP to connect to an FTP server with SSL and without SSL, and how to change the working directory using the CWD command, how to get the list of file names using the nlst command, how to upload the files to an FTP server directory using the storbinary command, how to download files from an FTP server using the retrbinary command, and some other important FTP actions required. So before starting to learn about FTP Python module, you might want to set up a local FTP server to test your Python code, right? So if you want to set up a local FTP server, then you can use IIS or FileZilla to create a local FTP server. In my case, I am using the FileZilla server to create a local FTP server. So if you don't know how to use IIS or FileZilla to create a local FTP server, I've already made a video on that, and I will leave the link of that video in the description of this video. So you can check out that video to understand how to set up a local FTP server. Once your local FTP server is set up, you want to make sure that it's up and running. So you need to have an FTP client for that, right? So WinSCP is a great FTP client tool using which you can see whether your FTP server is running or not, and you can see your files in the FTP server using that tool. So I also covered using WinSCP in the previous video, so you can go check out that video to learn how to use WinSCP also. So the first sample which you are going to cover is how to connect to an FTP server using ftplib. So for that, I've set up a local FTP server using the FileZilla server. Now my FTP server is running. I'm using the WinSCP to confirm that my FTP server is running. You can see it's connected to the local host. The username is ABCD. So now I'm sure that my FTP server is running in the local host. So let's get started with coding and open a blank folder. This is my blank folder. I'm going to open it with VS Code. I'm going to create a new file. I'll just name it index.py. So first let's try to import the FTP Python module. So I'll just write import FTP FTP comes along with Python, so you don't need to do any pip install, something like that. It comes along with Python. And to connect to an FTP server, you need to have some connection parameters, right? So the connection parameters required to connect to an FTP server are the FTP host address. So I'm creating a new variable called FTP host and write the host name here. So since I'm running the FTP server in the local host, my host name is localhost. So if you're running a remote FTP server, so you have to write the IP address or the host name of that remote FTP server. And the next parameter required is the FTP port. So by default, all the FTP servers run on port 21. My localhost FTP server is also running on port 21. And the next parameters required is the FTP username. So I'm creating a variable called FTP username, and my username is ABCD. And the next thing is FTP password. So this is the FTP password required to connect to the FTP server. So this is my FTP password. All right, these are the connection parameters. So the next step we have to do is create an FTP client instance. So to create an FTP client instance, you just have to call ftplib.ftp, and this is how you can create an FTP client instance. So let's assign it to a variable called FTP. So my FTP variable is now an FTP client instance. So one problem generally people face is if your FTP server is a remote FTP server, and if your connectivity is slow or your FTP server is slow, then you might face frequent timeouts unnecessarily. So if you want to increase the timeout of your FTP connection, you can set the timeout here. So you can just write timeout equal to 30. By giving the timeout option, you are increasing the timeout of the FTP connectivity and communication. I have given timeout equal to 30. That means my connection can wait for 30 seconds. By default, it's something like 12 seconds or something like that. So if your connection is fast, then you don't need to mention this timeout input. All right, we've created an FTP client instance. So now we have to connect to the FTP server using this client. So I'll just write ftp.connect, and here I will let the FTP host and the port. So FTP host is a variable called FTP host, which is localhost, and the port is 21, which is stored in this variable called FTP port. So now I'm connected to the FTP server. The next thing is you have to log into the FTP server. So for that, you just have to call ftp.login and give the username or password. So my username is FTP username and the password is FTP password. So this is how you can log into an FTP server. So once you're logged into the FTP server, you can do anything like downloading files, uploading files, etc. So I'll just write do something, and after doing your job, you have to quit the FTP connection, right? So for that, you just have to call ftp.quit. So what this command does is that it will send the quit command to the FTP server and close the connection. And that's it. This is how simple it is to connect to an FTP server using ftplib. First, you create a FTP client and then connect to the server, log into the server, do your task and quit. That's all. So let's try to run this. I'll just run this here, and here you can see execution complete. So let's try to give some wrong parameter here. I'll just change the username. I'll write ABCDE, which is non-existent. So I have to get an error now. So let's run this here, and you can see login incorrect error has come. So I will just make it correct again and just run this, and you can see execution complete. So this is how you can connect to an FTP server using ftplib. The next topic we are going to cover is how to connect to an FTP server that uses SSL to accept connections. So for that, I'll just modify my FileZilla server to accept only SSL connections. So here in my FileZilla server, I'll just write server configure, and here in the FTP server section, I'll change the protocol to use require explicit FTP over TLS. So I'll click OK. Now my FTP server only accepts SSL connections. So in order to accommodate that in your Python script, you just have to write FTP underscore TLS. So while creating the client, you have to write ftplib.ftp underscore TLS. And then after logging in, you have to use the function ftp.protp. So what this does is it will secure the data connection. So just two changes are required while connecting to an FTP server over SSL. That is, you have to use ftp.ftp underscore TLS and use ftp.protp. So let's try to run this now. And here you can see execution is complete. So let me try to create an error by just using ftplib.ftp and just save it and run this. And here you can see use authorization first. So once again, I'll write ftp underscore TLS, save it, and now run this again. You can say execution complete. So this is how you can connect to an FTP server which uses SSL to communicate. So now again, I will configure my FTP server to not use SSL. So I'll just click select configure, and here. Alright, let's try to move to the next topic, which is changing the working directory using the CWD function. So here in my WinSCP, you can see I've got a folder called folder1, and inside that I have called a folder called ABCD, and in this folder I've got two files. So if you want to download files or upload files into this folder, it's convenient to change your working directory to this folder path called folder1/abcd. So this is what exactly we are going to do now. So just after logging in, you just have to change your working directory. You just write ftp.cwd. CWD means change working directory to the folder which you require. So in my case, my folder is folder1/abcd. So this is my folder which I am going to change my current working directory to. So I'll just save this and run this. And here you can see execution is complete without any errors. But what happened in the background was, instead of having the root directory as the current working directory, FTP client has modified the current working directory to a directory called folder1/abcd, which can be seen here in WinSCP. Let's try to create a wrong folder path like abcde, which is non-existent, and try to run this. And here you can see you got an error called couldn't open the file or directory because the directory is not present at all. So let me try to keep the correct folder path and run this again, and here you can see execution complete. So that's how you can use the CWD command to change the working directory to a different folder. Alright, let's try to move to the next example, which is getting the list of file names in a folder. So it's really simple. You just use the ftp.nlst, which gives the list of file names in an FTP current folder. So this function returns a list of file names. So I'll just write fnames. So fnames will be a list of strings, which is the list of file names in the FTP current working directory. I can just print this to show you what the file names look like. So I'll just write print file names. So that's it. Using the nlist function, you can get the list of file names into a variable. So let me try to run this again. I got the list of file names abcd.txt, filezilla server admin1.png. You can see all these file names in the root directory of this FTP server. Suppose you want to get the list of file names in this folder called folder1/abcd. There are two file names in this folder, right? So if you want to get the list of these file names, you can change the current working directory and get the file names using the nlist function. So let's try to do that now. First, let's try to change the current working directory. So I'll write ftp.cwd, and I'm going to write the directory name where I want to get the file names, right? So here I'm going to write folder1/abcd. So now currently I've changed my current working directory, and then I'm going to get the list of file names. So let me try to run this now, and here you can see def and rguj.docs. These are the file names present in this directory. If you see my blog post, I have created a function called get ftp file names with all the required parameters like host, port, username, password, and the remote working directory. And this actually gives you a very simple interface to just call a single function and get all the file names. So you can just copy paste this function in your projects and get the list of file names in whatever the FTP directory you want. So here I also use the try except clause so that I can handle errors like no folder found, and you can even use your own exception handling. So let me try to run this now, and here you can see I've got the file names. I've just created a function and I've just called it. So you can use this approach also in your projects so that your code looks clean. Alright, so let's try to move to the next example where we are going to upload a file to the FTP server. So for that purpose, I've created a file called def.txt in this folder. It has some junk text. So I want to upload this def.txt into a folder called folder1/abcd. You can see I don't have the def.txt here. I have only a document file. So now I'm going to use ftplib to transfer this df.txt to this ftp folder where the working directory is folder1/abcd. So for that, first I have to change my working directory, right? So I'll just write ftp.cwd, and here my working directory would be folder1/abcd. Let me try to define a local file path which I'm going to upload to the server. So I'll just write local file path equal to def.txt. So this is the file path which I'm going to upload to the server. So first I want to open this file using the open function. So I'll just write with open the local file path as file, and here I'm going to open it to read only the binary content. So I'll just write the read binary flag here, and then I'm going to use the ftp.storbinary to upload the file to the server. You have to write the string stor and write the file name here df.txt, and here the contents of the file, which is the file variable which you have created here. So this has the binary contents of the file which you are going to upload. And if you want to upload more chunks of the file to the server directly so that you can avoid more round trips, you can increase the block size of the transfer using this block size equal to, suppose I want it as 1 MB, I can write 1024 into 1024 bytes. That means I'm making the block size as 1 MB. So if your file is like 10 MB, it can make only 10 round trips. So if you want to make less round trips to the FTP server, you can increase the block size. In return, you'll get a return code string. You can use this string to determine whether your upload action is success or not. So if this return code string starts with 226, that means your upload is success. So here I can write if return code dot starts with 226, that means your upload is success. So I can write print upload success, or else upload is not successful. Alright, let's try to revise what we have done till now. We have changed the current working directory because I want to upload my file to that working directory, and then I define the path of the file. And here the local file path can be anything like C users, whatever. You can give the absolute file path also, and then you have to open the file path to get the contents of the file as binary text. So here I'm writing open file path read binary as file. So you have the contents of the file in this file variable, and once it's open, you can use the ftp.stor binary to upload the file contents to the FTP server. And here I'm writing stor space df.txt. So this is the file name of the uploaded file, and here this is the file contents, and I've kept the block size as 1 MB because I want less round trips. So if you don't care about the round trips, you can ignore the block size. And this returns a string, and I'm storing that string in a variable called return code. And if that variable starts with the string 226, then your upload is success. So that's it, guys. So let's try to run this code now. And here you can see upload success. And in WinSCP, you can see I'm refreshing it here, and you can see the df.txt is uploaded to my server. So that's it, guys. Just using stor binary, you can upload files to an FTP server. Now in my blog post, I have created a function called upload file to FTP, where I have given you the local file path, the FTP connection parameters, and the remote working directory where you want to upload the file. So in this function, you can see I'm doing the same thing, but I'm handling some more parameters. If I give the local file path, I'm splitting the file path to get the file name. Because if you mention the file path as C users abcd.txt, the file name will be only abcd.txt. So that thing we are extracting the file name here, and if you have mentioned the remote working directory, we are changing the working directory, and here I am substituting the derived file name instead of hard coding the file name. So here you can see the target file name which we are derived from splitting the local file is used in this stor command. That means if you mention the local file name as df.txt, the server file name will also be df.txt, and you don't need to hard code it here. Alright. Let's move to the next example where I will download the file from the FTP server. So if you want to download this file called rguj.docs from this folder1/abcd folder in the FTP server to my current directory, then I can use the retrieve binary function of the FTP client. So let's try to download the file from the FTP server. First I have to change the working directory. So I'll write ftp.cwd, and my working directory is folder1/abcd, and my target file name which I have to download is rguj.docs. And the local file path where I'm going to save this document from the server is the same thing, rguj.docs. So I'll just write the target file name here. So now I got my input and output file names. So let's try to use the ftp.retrieve binary function to download the file from the FTP server. So first I'll open the local file. So I'll just write with open the local file path, and I'll write binary as file, and then I'll write ftp.retrieve binary, and here I'm going to write retr space the server file name, which is the target file name. So I'll just copy this here and write the target file name, and here the function would be file.write, and in return of this retrieve binary function you'll get a string which contains the return code. So I'll just write return code equal to. So this way, using the retrieve binary function, you can download a file from the FTP server. So the target file name is the file name in the FTP server, which is rguj.docs, and the local file path is the file path where you want to save the document. Suppose I want to save it in C users somewhere, something like that. You can write it here. But for my example, I'm just downloading the file to the same folder. So I've kept the same target file name here. So once the download is complete, you can check whether it's successful or not by using the return code. So I'll just write if return code starts with 226, your download is success, or else your download is unsuccessful. So let's try to run this now. And here you can see download success, and the file has been downloaded here. The document file has been downloaded here. So this is how, using the ftp.retrieve binary, you can download the file from the FTP server to the local computer. And here you can see in my blog post, I have created a function called download files from FTP. You can directly copy paste this function in your project and use this. This takes the local folder path and the target file names which you want to download from the server. So I've written this function to handle with multiple file names. So if you want to download multiple file names, this function can do it at once. And the FTP host, port, username, password, these are the FTP connection parameters, and the remote working directory. So if your files are present in some remote working directory, you have to give the remote working directory explicitly here. If you don't give it, it will be none, and current working directory will not be changed. So here in my function, I'm just using a simple for loop, and I'm iterating through the target file names and just downloading the files using this ftp.retrieve binary function. That's all. So that's it, guys. We have covered how to list the file names from the FTP server, how to download files from the FTP server, how to upload files into the FTP server, along with examples till now. Let's try to talk about some other important FTP actions. You can see ftp.rename. So ftp.rename can be used to rename a file in the server. So let's try to use it now. So let's try to rename this file called rguj.docs in the folder1/abcd folder of the FTP server. So I'll just write ftp.rename and the original file name, which is the target file name, and then the modified file name, I'll just write it as abcde.docs. So let me try to just run this, and here you can see execution complete. And in my FTP server, let me try to reload this, and here you can see the document name has been changed because we have used the ftp.rename function here. And the next function we can talk about is ftp.delete, which will delete the file in the server. So let me try to delete this file called abcde.docs in the server. So I'll just write ftp.delete and write abcde.docs, and this is not required now. So let me try to run this now. And here you can see execution is complete, and here if I just reload this folder, you can see abcde.docs is not present because we have used ftp.delete function to delete the file in the server. And the next one is ftp.make directory. So you can create a new folder in the FTP server using this make directory. So let's try to do that. So I'll just call ftp.make directory. I'll just make a directory called test. So in the folder1/abcd folder of the server, I'm creating a directory called test. So I'll just save it and run this, and the execution is complete. So in the FTP server, if you just reload this, here you can see you got a new folder called test because we have used the ftp.make directory function to create a new folder in the FTP server. And ftp.pwd will return the current directory on the server, and ftp.remove directory will remove the directory or delete the directory in the server. So if I just want to remove this directory called test in the server, I can just write ftp.rmd, which is remove directory, and just save it and run this, and the execution is complete. And here if I refresh this, you can see the test folder is deleted because we have used the ftp.remove directory function to delete the folder called test in the server. And ftp.size will give you the size of the file present in the server. So let me try to use that here. I'll just write ftp.size daf.txt, and I'll just print the ftp.size so that I can know the size of the FTP file. So I'll just run this here, and here you can see the size is 43. So 43 is the size of the file called def.txt in the FTP server. And you have ftp.dir, which will give the directory contents. So let's try to use that here. So write ftp.dir here and just run this. And here you can see I got the FTP directory contents. You can see the file called def.txt present in the folder1/abcd. So if you want to see the whole FTP contents, I'll just comment out this and save it and run this again. I can see all the FTP folder contents in the root directory. So if you see the root directory, these are the files, right? So that thing, just like Unix representation, I got all the file contents. So using nlst, I can get all the file names, and using dir, you can get more file description as a single text in each line. So that's it, guys. These are some other important functions which can be used while using the ftplib Python library. You can see I've created a blog post on using ftplib for FTP server communication, and I've also given you the source code for all the examples so that you can copy paste and practice it in your own computer. You can even copy these functions which I've created in my blog post and use them directly in your projects. I've also given you the reference to the official ftplib documentation, so be sure to check out the link of this blog post in the description of this video. Feel free to provide your valuable feedback or ask any doubts in the comment section. Hope you like this video, guys. Thank you for watching.